What's up guys, this is your Python Ninja, and in this Python series I'm going to show you how to make your very own Pong game completely from scratch. And I actually put a lot of work to make this series, so I would highly appreciate if you give this video a thumbs up as well as subscribe to my channel. Now without further ado, let's hop right into it. So starting off, I'm just going to show you what the end result of our game is going to look like. So I'm just going to run my program, and you can see here that I have two fully functioning paddles and a ball, and you can see that when I score on my opponent, the ball resets and the game continues with the winner receiving a point, as you can see. And you can also see that there's sound playing as well. So the first thing I'm going to do is to import what's called the turtle module. Okay, so I'm simply going to say import and turtle. Okay, so basically the turtle module gives us access to all sorts of functions and tools for creating basic games like Pong. But this is not the only way to make Pong. For example, we can use something called the Pygame module, but the turtle module is generally easier to create games with. So after creating my turtle module, what I'm going to do now is to create a screen so that I can actually see my game in action. Okay, so I'm just going to create a screen object, and to do this I'm just going to create a variable called screen, or simply just scrn. And here I'm just going to say screen equals turtle.screen, okay, with open and close parentheses and a capital S. So basically what I'm doing here is I'm referring to my turtle module, which is here, and I'm basically accessing the screen object inside of it. Okay, so now that I created my screen object, I'm now going to set the background color of it. So I'm just going to come down here. I'm just going to say screen.bg color, and I'm simply going to set my background color to black, which is basically the classic Pong color, right? So now that I set the background color of my screen, I'm now going to set the size of my screen. So I'm simply going to say screen.setup, and here I'm going to pass in a width of 800 pixels and a height of 600 pixels, okay? And this will ensure that I get a square-like aspect ratio, okay? So after setting up my screen, I'm now going to do something called screen.tracer0, okay? And what this basically does is it allows the game to run much more smoothly. And another thing I need to actually do is to make this work is to create what you call a while loop, okay? So I'm just going to come down here at the bottom of my program, and I'm just simply going to say while true with a capital T and then a colon, okay? And basically a while loop is a structure which allows you to repeat or loop through a block of code indefinitely. So whatever code I write below this while true is going to repeat forever. And here's where I would write the main code for my program and do things like checking for collision between my ball and my paddle later on. But for this tutorial, all I'm going to write in my while loop is simply screen.update, okay? And what this basically does is it allows you to manually update your screen so that you get a much smoother Pong game. So now that I made my game much smoother, I'm now going to create my paddles, okay? And throughout this tutorial, I'm actually going to make comments. So if you ever forget what a block of code does, you can just look at these comments and remember it again. So here I'm just going to write a £, and then I'm just going to write paddle1. So we know that we're going to create our first paddle, okay? So I'm just going to skip a line, and the first thing I'm going to do is to create my paddle object, okay? To do so, it's very similar to before. I'm just going to name my variable. So I'm just going to name it paddle1, and here I'm just going to say equals, and then I can simply say turtle dot And here, instead of saying turtle.screen, I'm actually going to say turtle.turtle, since this is basically a turtle object, okay? So anything like any sort of object that we have in our game is considered a turtle. So after creating my paddle object, I'm now going to give my paddle a shape. So I'm just going to say paddle1.shape, and you know how in Pong the paddle is rectangular? Well, to do this with the turtle module, what I basically need to do is I need to set the shape to a square, okay, first. So I'm just going to say paddle1.shape, and then I'm just going to say square instead of quotation marks. And in order to make this rectangular, I'm going to come down here and change another property called shape size, okay? And this basically allows me to stretch the square out to make it look rectangular, okay? I'm going to say paddle1.shape size, and here I'm basically going to pass in two arguments, okay? So the first argument is going to be how much I want to stretch the length of my shape, and the second parameter is going to be how much I want to stretch the width of my shape, okay? So by default, whenever you want to create an object in Turtle, the dimensions are actually 20 pixels high by 20 pixels wide. And since I want my paddle to be rectangular, I need to increase the length by 5 times. So I'm basically going to say shape size 5. So I'm just going to say 5 for the length, and I can also decrease the width by half, so it's more skinny. So I'm just going to say 5 comma and then half, okay? And this basically allows me to get a nice and long paddle. So now that I made my paddle nice and rectangular, I'm now going to set the color of my paddle, okay? So I'm just going to say paddle1.color. Here I'm basically going to set my paddle color to white, since that's obviously the main color in Pong, right? Now after doing so, I'm going to do something else called paddle1.pen up, okay? And what this basically does is, basically Turtle is meant to be a module for drawing. And this means that every object is meant to draw a line as it moves. But since we're not drawing anything, the pen up function is very useful, since it prevents our objects from drawing on our screen. So now that I did that, I'm now going to set the position of my paddle. But first, I'm just going to show you how positions in Turtle actually work. So I'm just going to run my program. And you can see that I have my paddle sized where I want. And before I actually move it to its proper position, I'm just going to explain how positions in Turtle actually work. So basically, in Turtle, the 0, 0 position, or the origin, is at the center of my screen. And since my screen has a length of 800, that means the x coordinate here is going to be 400, and the x coordinate here is going to be negative 400, okay? And likewise, since my screen has a height of 600, this means that the y coordinate down here is going to be negative 300, and the y coordinate up here is going to be 300, okay? Now, since I want my first paddle here to be near the left side of my screen, I can just give it an x coordinate of something like negative 350 and a y coordinate of 0, so that it's vertically centered, okay? And in order to do this, I'm just going to go to my program, and I'm just going to say paddle1.goTo. This is basically what you use to set the position of an object in Turtle, okay? So I'm just going to say goTo, and then I'm just going to say negative 350 and then 0, okay? So basically I'm passing in an x coordinate of negative 350 and a y coordinate of 0 to set the position of my paddle, okay? So now I'm just going to run my program. And as you can see, my paddle is at the left side of my screen. Now for my second paddle, so paddle 2, instead of typing everything out again, what I can actually do is that I can copy what I had here for my first paddle, and I can just paste it in here. And all I have to do is to change all the paddle 1s here to paddle 2s, okay? So that's what I'm going to do now. Say paddle 2, paddle 2. And now, what I want to do is to change negative 350 here to 350, since I want my second paddle to be at the right side of my screen, okay? And now, if I go ahead and run my program, you'll see that I have a paddle at the right side of my screen. Now that I created my two paddles, I'm now going to create my ball. So I'm just going to write a comment here. I'm going to say ball. And since my ball is a turtle object like my paddle, and it has similar properties, instead of typing everything out again, I'm just going to copy the line for my paddles. Okay, I'm just going to copy this. Here, instead of having paddle 2s, I could just change them to ball. Okay. And now that I changed everywhere to ball, I'm now going to set the shape of my ball so that it's a circle. Okay, so I'm just going to go to where it says square, and I'm just going to change it to a circle. Okay. And since I want my ball to be a perfect circle, I don't want to do any sort of resizing like I did with my paddles. So I can just delete the line where I'm changing the shape size of my ball. Okay. And now that I did that, next thing I want to do is to set the position of my ball so that it's at the center of my screen. Okay. And to do so, I can just go to where it says go to, and I can just change this to 0, 0, basically. Okay. And now you can see that I have my ball at the center of my screen along with my two paddles.